Ready to call to order the Wednesday, September 15th, 2021 Garrison Board of Education regular business meeting. Justin, will you call the roll, please? Carl, you're...
Jocelyn Apicello. Here. David Gelber. Here. Madeline Julian. Here. Courtney McCarthy.
Here.
Kent Schott.
Excused.
Matthew Spicer.
Here.
Sarah Tormey.
Here. All right, now we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Next up, we have agenda changes / approval. Does anyone have any recommended changes to this evening's agenda? Okay. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Thank you. We will now move on to the public hearing portion of this evening. Okay. We will begin with the Code of Conduct. At this time, we will open the public hearing for the 2021-2022 Code of Conduct public hearing. A brief overview of the Code of Conduct will be given by Principal Allison Amig, followed by a time for members of the board to ask questions. I will then open up the floor for members of the public to ask questions pertaining only to the Code of Conduct. Allison, I invite you to the microphone. That's okay. Can I just have this? Thank you so much. Okay. All right. Okay.
Welcome. Thank you for having me tonight. So I'm excited, like always, to be here tonight to share with you the Code of Conduct. So it's in its draft form, and I want to just go and take you through the process and the thinking that went into this Code of Conduct and our next steps in that process. So I just want to first off say that I am having an incredible time being back at school, and having the kids back and the teachers back has just been so amazing for me. And just to watch how they are so grown up. They get 2 months off, and it's like I don't even recognize the kids. They're so tall, they're grown, they're having a wonderful, wonderful transition. So I'm thrilled to be back in action. So with that being said, when I first got here in Garrison back in November, the Code of Conduct was something that was presented to me as something that needed to be updated. But one of the things that I recognized right away was that it was a document that I really couldn't tackle unless I needed more information. I needed to understand what the values are of the community. I needed to understand and observe what current procedures were in place. I needed to, understand the culture and the climate, and that helped. All of those observations helped for me to craft this document. So, the process. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see. It all starts with us as leaders, as teachers. When I walk into the building, I set the stage and the tone as principal for the building. I have to model what's expected for students, model what's expected for teachers and how we act, in the building to promote a positive school culture. So it all starts here. I can walk in the door 1 minute and I have the power, unfortunately, to influence whether it's going to be a good day or a bad day for a student. And that's very powerful. So I make sure I check my energy when I walk in the door every single day. I put my baggage in, I leave it in the car because we all have baggage, and I come and I start the school day and I embrace kids. So we start the day in a positive way where it's, greetings and getting to know kids and making sure that every student feels that love and feels supported. And I try to do that every single day, and building those connections and relationships with the students and the teachers. So it starts here, And the teachers are also, and I think this is why we're having a really smooth transition, the teachers are doing an incredible job with reigniting the learning and building those relationships, because that really is the heart of a code of conduct, and what prevents behaviors is active engagement, student engagement, intellectual engagement, and positive, strong relationships. So part of what influenced the code of conduct was watching and hearing how our skills and dispositions to the coherence plan was shaping. And so you're going to see a lot of language within the code of conduct that comes from the dispositions that we're looking for in our kids. So showing signs of respect, having integrity, being honest. So these are those dispositions that you'll see over and over throughout this code of conduct that is outlined. I also use the anti-racism and diversity document and the mission statement. You'll see some language in there that's also embedded in this code of conduct. We tried really having a lens, an equity lens, and just from race to gender and neurodiversities, understanding that kids are not always typical, and making sure that there is a reflection of all of our students within this document. So that was also part of the lens that we were using as we were writing this document. The next thing that I was doing and taking into account was just, what are the local districts, what are they doing? What are they saying in their code of conducts? So I did a lot of research, and from our surrounding districts. I also was researching through NYSSBA. There's a ton of recommendations in NYSSBA, and it gives you wonderful language, too, to help flesh out what are the key components that you need to have in a code of conduct, from definitions to essential partners to how to file a DASA report, steps and process for if you have to go through a more a consequence that is more progressive and might feel punitive but might be necessary, like a suspension. So there's specific procedures that are outlined also in here. Additionally, I was doing a lot of research also on restorative practices, because what the direction and the feel of the code of conduct is definitely more of a coaching model. So when we have kids who have an infraction, let's say, it could be cell phone use or inappropriate cell phone use, we really want to go through a coaching model with students and look at that as a teaching moment. The code of conduct is going to reflect that we recognize that kids are going to make mistakes. It's who they are, and we have to use those as opportunities so that we can hold kids accountable, because that's a huge piece, but also teach them along the way. And if we see that they're able to then internalize the skills that we need for them to use, so that they're making better decisions, then that's the pathway we need them to go on. But sometimes that doesn't always happen, and we have to take a different measure and a different course of action and a different consequence, which is outlined on the last page of the code of conduct that I'll get to. We also had Krista DiDiego over the summer. She worked a lot with me over this summer in helping to flesh out certain key points that we want to, kind of drive within the code of conduct. Again, like things like using the Yale Ruler program and making sure that that's in here, making sure that this document also reflects dialectical behavior therapy as a means to also help to remediate challenges for some kids. And so her lens was very critical. She was a stakeholder involved with helping to flesh out this document. Also Jessica Van Decker and teachers, we had their input as well once the document was in a rough draft form, and then they would weigh in and help to craft certain sections. Including office people, our office support staff. Someone like Sarah Lasardi, who is a key critical player in the main office, she was also a key player, because this is a code of conduct not only for our students, but it's also a code of conduct for us as teachers. It's a code of conduct for parents as well, visitors, when visitors come on school grounds. So this is like a wonderful document for us to really embrace and really get to know well, on what is expected of us when we come to a public school and how we have respectful dialogue with each other and how we carry and conduct ourselves within school grounds. So one of the big shifts that I did talk about is that the code of conduct is more of restorative, and that's one of the key emphasis that I want to drive home, where you're restoring order within a building. You are restoring relationships if relationships break down and there's student conflict, and it might warrant a referral. And that referral will indicate to me as a principal, like, what direction are we going to go in? And in most cases, it results in a coaching model where I work very closely with Krista DiDiego and Jessica with coaching our kids to resolve their conflicts. It's all about repairing the damage that perhaps was done among two people or among a group of students, repairing that relationship, restoring it, and we call them life-based interviews, which actually, this is coming from crisis therapy, crisis intervention from Cornell. And the life-based interview is really an accountability interview with students and having them come to a realization that something that they have done perhaps crossed the line, and now it's time to repair. And that's an accountability measure. So again, we have in the code of conduct, we have a whole list of student responsibilities and student expectations. It's clearly written out. There's 20 of them. One of our next steps is to be able to pare this down so that this way we have a very kid-friendly version. So developing a student handbook would be our next steps. Being able to continue professional development that's centered around teaching and learning. Definitely promoting student engagement, because we know that student engagement in the classroom is critical to preventing behaviors. Continuing professional development around social emotional learning, our ruler program, restorative practices such as advisory groups, restorative circles. These are measures in which we can take as a school to help our students. Refining our child study team as a vehicle to analyze behaviors and create plans. The referral process, how we look at behavior and how we define behavior as a team and figure out, like, well, why is the behavior occurring anyway? Why is this happening? And we have these conversations at the child study team and creating a system and a process in which we document certain behaviors through our referral process. And then, of course, building consistent practices. One of the key things to a successful school is making sure that we're consistent across the board within the elementary school classrooms, our middle school classrooms, how we interact too in the main office. In off-school grounds even, there's a section on how things affect the classroom environment even when you're home, and if things do happen outside of school. So those would be our next steps. The last page in the Code of Conduct is something that spells out, and it's in a chart form. I'm just going to tear this off right here. Not that you guys can see it, but it could be just a good visual anyway. But it's progressive, and it just has an arrow going down, and it spells out, it gives examples of what a level 1 infraction would be. And so a level 1 infraction would be something that is a minor act of misconduct, and it wouldn't warrant, let's say, an in-school suspension. So all of these levels do require remediation and coaching, restorative mindset. But once you start getting into other infraction levels, like level 3, the course of action might be more disciplinary, and it might result in, let's say, an in-school suspension or an out-of-school suspension. But one of the things that I have learned being here is that we have amazing families that are very collaborative as essential partners that help, to shape what our expectations are, and our teachers are exceptional. And so between the partnerships with the teachers and the community and the parents, I'm feeling really, really, really good about where we're headed this year in terms of just the culture in the building and the positivity. And we're off to a really good start right now. The momentum is pretty awesome. And I just feel it. And that's the kind of, when you have that type of feeling, you're going to have less behavior. And so it's all about the learning and the teaching, and it's all about the relationships and the connections. So that is just a quick, brief overview. I know you have a lot on your plate, but I definitely welcome some questions.
Thank you, Allison. I know this is a document we've been looking to revise for a number of years, and I greatly appreciate your attention to this. I will open it up for questions or comments from other board members.
I don't have any questions, but my comment is I truly appreciate you taking the time to revise it and to use what the district is working on, like the coherence plan, like the equity and anti-racism task forces work, and diving into where the field of kind of discipline, quote unquote, is going, which is more restorative. So I really enjoyed reading all of those additions to it, because as a policy committee member, I've looked at the old one a number of times, and so I'm happy to see all of these additions.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I will also add, if anyone else has comments here, jump in that I really appreciate the new dress code. I think it removed the gender bias, which I really appreciated. And I hope everyone will take the time to read that one closely. And I do appreciate that it also does adhere. I know some of this stuff is outside our control and is set forth in education law. And I think this very closely aligns with the education law as well. So it strikes, in my mind, a very nice balance.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have to tell you that your kids in middle school helped to influence the dress code when they did a mini protest on the dress code policy last year. And I explained to the kids today, not today, it was the other day, I showed them the code of conduct, and in kid-friendly language, I told them how you have a voice in this as a stakeholder. You are a huge influencer of this code of conduct. And when last year they were like, we want to have this dress code reevaluated. And they were right. They were right. The kids have a strong voice. They know what they want. They know what feels right, and they know what feels wrong. And so I shared with them that they helped with this.
That's great. Courtney?
I'll just say I agree with what Sarah and Jocelyn both said, and I know it took a while, and this was a huge amount of work. I appreciate the time you took, and that you didn't rush it, that you didn't say, oh yeah, I'll knock this out in my first 3 months here. And instead you said, no, I need to see what this place is about. I need to get to know these kids. I need to get to know the teachers and the parents and the community, and it shows. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
If I have no further comments or questions from board members, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. If we have any members of the public who wish to say it. Okay, thank you. Okay, well then I'm going to go ahead with this concludes the public hearing for the 2021-2022 Code of Conduct. And the board will now consider a resolution to approve it. Unlike the safety plan, which we'll get to next, we can approve the Code of Conduct this evening should we wish to. So I'm going to go straight to the resolution. Okay. I'm going to read the recommended action. Be resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves and adopts the 2021-2022 Code of Conduct. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. And before we move to a vote, I will note that we will have a chance to update this every year and take a look at it. It's not like it's written in stone till the end of time. So, yes, exactly. As Allison just said, it's a living, breathing document, and we really look forward to continuing the work on this. But now move to a vote, unless anyone has further questions. Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Thank you very much. Okay. Now we will move on to the public hearing for the district-wide safety plan. At this time, we will open the public hearing for the 2021-2022 district-wide safety plan. A brief overview of the safety plan will be given by Superintendent Carl Albano, followed by a time for members of the board to ask questions. I will then open up the floor for members of the public to ask questions pertaining only to the district-wide safety plan. Okay, Carl?
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So, as Sarah said earlier, once a year, the Commissioner's regulations require us to update our district-wide school safety plan as well as our building safety plan. The document that the board has in board docs and they've had the opportunity to review is the district-wide plan. This has much less detail than the building plan, and for obvious reasons. The building plan contains things like our floor plans and specific details about what we would do in any given emergency situation. This is more general, and this is for public consumption, so it is also posted on the district's website. And it includes things like the identification of the district-wide safety team. Also, it talks about our various required training drills and exercises that take place throughout the school year, fire drills, lockdown drills, early dismissal emergency drill. It also talks about some of the trainings that go on in the district. And the other category is it requires us to have, as I said earlier, an emergency response team. That's at the building level. That's all internal people. And it has all of the contacts of all of the emergency agencies in the area. Police department, the sheriff's department, the fire department, New York State troopers, who are all first responders for Garrison. This is updated. There was one oversight that I did catch, and that was one of the bullets on page 6, where it says students are participating in the PBIS program. You heard Mrs. Amig talk about our new program is the Ruler program. That is well underway. Staff has gone through training, and that is our SEL program, and it teaches students to recognize, understand, label, express, and modulate and regulate their emotions. So other than that, I think this is up to date. I also would add that this has been developed in collaboration with our BOCES district safety coordinator, Frank Guglieri. Frank does a great job. He's very knowledgeable, so he has also had input into this plan as well. Again, the requirement is it's posted on the website. This is our public hearing this evening. People certainly can give feedback this evening or any time over the next 30 days. Then I will bring this back to the board if there's no further comment and no changes, or if there are some minor changes, I'll bring it back to the board in 30 days for final approval. Oh, and lastly, then this plan, as well as the building plan, is sent out to all of the emergency response agencies. That's important. They have every level of detail about our district so they can support us in an emergency situation. So I would be happy to take any questions you may have.
Jocelyn?
Oh, Madeline, go for it. My only question is that we approve this every year, a safety plan. So is there any, besides PBIS, is there anything else that you would flag as something that was really changed that we should?
There are no major changes other than just updating all those emergency contacts, our internal staff. There were no other procedural changes, and a lot of this is required by law.
Right, thank you.
So.
Madeline?
The same question.
You're welcome.
Courtney?
I apologize if I didn't see it here, but for lockdown drills, is there advance notice given? Either there's been different ways it's been handled in the past, of whether sometimes an email has gone out to parents saying this will be happening this week, or nothing at all, an email afterwards saying a lockdown drill was conducted. What's the procedure currently?
We should not do advance notice. That is the advice and the guidance. However, maybe it's a good discussion for this evening. It's an open hearing. We can certainly, after a lockdown drill occurs, we certainly can give parents a notification. This way, if your child comes home, you could have a conversation, follow up with them. I know we have a number of parents here this evening. If you think that would be helpful, that's actually a very easy thing for us to do.
That's been done in the past, for sure, that I recall.
Yeah, that's right.
That, if it isn't too much as part of the communication plan of the district, it can't hurt.
Okay. Mrs. Amig, that would be an easy thing for us to handle. It's not asking too much. It would take a matter of, 1 or 2 minutes just to let you know that a lockdown drill occurred. So we will make that part of our procedure.
Great, thanks.
Do I have any other board member questions or comments on the safety plan as presented?
No.
Okay, I'm going to open up this public hearing to the public. If anyone has any comments regarding the district-wide safety plan. Okay. Great, then this concludes the public hearing for the 2021-2022 district-wide safety plan. The draft of the plan has been posted to the homepage of the district website for the community to review and will remain there until the October 20th Board of Education meeting, when the board is scheduled to vote on a resolution to adopt the plan. Members of the public are invited to email questions, suggestions, and comments directly to the superintendent regarding the safety plan between now and October 20th. And board, if you have any follow-up questions, please send them along. Okay, that concludes our public hearings for this evening. Next up, we're going to move on to board communications and presentations. This evening, we have a discussion of NYSSBA resolutions and voting for the annual convention. All right, so everyone in the goal of this evening, we have the NYSSBA resolutions. NYSSBA is the school board's advocate to Albany on what we want them to focus on to help schools. This does not mean these things will happen. Even if NYSSBA pushes really hard, it doesn't mean, say, foundation aid automatically gets increased or changed. But it's what they will lobby for on behalf of school districts. Madeline, who is our representative to NYSSBA, will be attending the conference and voting on our behalf. This evening as a group, we will come to a consensus on how we wish her to vote. If we can't come to a consensus on something, she can always abstain. There are a lot of these resolutions. I'm going to move fairly quickly. If you would like me to slow down or have any objections, just please wave your hand or shout out. All right. So first up, we have resolution number 1. This is proposed by the Board of Directors, and it calls upon the state legislator and governor to reform New York State education funding in accordance with the tenets listed below on this. I'm going to go with the ones these are ones recommended by the NYSSBA committee. So the question I will ask, are there any objections to supporting this amendment and allowing Madeline to vote yes? Or do you have any questions about this one?
No.
Okay, sounds like without that, we are a consensus for a yes on resolution 1, Madeline. Okay, sorry, I'll unclip my papers here. Resolution 2, this is also proposed by the NYSSBA Board of Directors, that the School Boards Association supports state proposals affecting public education, and it lists a bunch of achieving equity, promote efficiency, advance high expectations, embrace innovative approaches, and foster community engagement. Does anyone have any objections to voting yes on proposed resolution 2, or any questions or comments regarding this resolution? Okay, I'm going to take that as consensus that we will vote yes for proposed resolution 2. Proposed resolution 3, again submitted by the NYSSBA Board of Directors. We're going to take a minute here. This is one that proposes that New York State School Boards Association support proposals that would allow students with disabilities to be tested at their developmental age. And I believe we did have some questions on this one. So, Madeline, do you want to go first with the questions?
Yes, so the question is, maybe this is,
Yeah.
can we understand more of the question, what developmental age means, to make sure that we're going the right way?
Sure. So just a little more clarity about what it means to test children at their developmental age. This proposal is for children with disability who may, for example, be 2 grade levels behind in reading or mathematics or their skill area. What this currently in our 3 through 8 testing program, whatever grade you're in, you must take that grade level exam every spring. This is proposing that if a child has a disability and, for example, is 2 grade levels behind, maybe in 5th grade, but behind in their skills, that they would sit for a 3rd grade exam, which the Committee on Special Education would deem to be developmentally appropriate for that child. It doesn't give all that much detail on how the CSE would arrive at that decision, but of course the CSE is driven by data. And we're doing, every 3 years there's a reeval, and there's ongoing testing and evaluation throughout the year and observation. So my understanding of this, Madeline, is that it will be left in the hands of the Committee on Special Education to determine what age is, what grade level is developmentally appropriate for a particular child.
In the current guidelines now, they have to take not the developmental age, but their actual age.
Sorry, Madeline, I can't hear you, sorry.
So right now they have to take the exam of their current age, not the developmental age.
Not necessarily age, but grade level.
Grade level.
So if you're in 6th grade, even if you're 2 years behind in your skills, you must still take the 6th grade exam. And this has been talked about in educational circles for a long time, where, particularly with special education teachers, believing that this is unfair. That, why would you test a child 2 grade levels above their performance and skill level? So that's why I believe New York State School Boards is actually behind this particular resolution and recommending it.
Thank you.
And
David.
Carl, what's the counter argument? If this is an issue within the educational community, let us know what the debate is.
Good question. The counter argument would be that potentially districts could lower expectations for children with disability, David. I think if you have an effective CSE, you will always maintain high expectations. My own personal belief is it's about growth. It's not about hitting a particular grade level. As long as there is growth. So if a child is 3 grade levels behind, and in a particular school year they grow 18 months or a year and a half, that's fantastic. They still might not end the year on grade level, but they're making growth. So I think if the CSE is functioning the way it should be functioning, they're setting appropriate goals. They're not lowering expectations for children with disability. But I do think there is, I guess, a counter argument that in some districts, you may lower the bar and have lower expectations for a child with disability. So that I think is a real risk for places that maybe are not handling their CSE process appropriately.
Can I just ask 2 questions, please? Why does this proposed Resolution 3 say sunsetting? Does that mean that it was actually already approved and it's maybe up for not being reapproved, so we should have been, or this is the current practice already? I guess I was kind of confused. A couple of them are sunsetting, so maybe that's the case,
it's the ones by the board of...
The boards are all sunsetting. I don't know what that really means. So maybe this is also for all of them. But similarly, related to Resolution 3, you feel like our CSE team, should this pass, our CSE team and our faculty can make that adequate decision for each of the children who are learning with disabilities to take their appropriate levels test, if this were to pass. But currently, that's not what we're doing, because it's not required.
Correct, Jocelyn. I'm very confident the Garrison CSE committee would set appropriate expectations and not lower the bar for students with disability. And I do believe all CSEs, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, which is collecting data, observing students, throughout the year, and then of course you're every 3 years you reeval. If you're doing that the way you are supposed to do it, then I think this is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Instead of having a child who's maybe 2 or 3 grade levels behind sit for a test that really is such a stretch that it only serves to frustrate the child. So I think a lot of educators in the field of special education would be supportive of this, and Allison has, if you want to hear another opinion, because this is my personal opinion, Allison is a true special education expert. Do you want to come up to the mic, Allison, and just quickly offer your opinion on this, if the board, I'm sorry, if you would like to hear?
Definitely, I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. A strong CSE is definitely going to keep the bar raised. Right now, and as I was always frustrated too, as a special education teacher years ago, for many, many years, having to put kids through let's say a sixth grade standardized test, or fifth grade standardized test when they had the reading capability of, let's say, a second grader. And what we were doing is, as a CSE, you make accommodations and adjustments to their instruction to hope and bridge that so that they can access the text and give testing accommodations. But you can't do modifications on the test. And that's where it's different. So the whole time in your classroom, you're modifying and accommodating, but yet you didn't have the ability to modify in the test. So there's a huge gap. And the only thing you can do is put those maybe extended time and accommodations for that student, but the text still remains the same. So it didn't align, from my opinion, with where the instruction was, because it was modified. So you have to be careful too, as special education teachers, that you are not over-modifying, that you're making accommodations, but not over-modifying and changing too much of the instruction. Because that's where you want to set that bar high, where you keep your expectations high by avoiding too much modification, and you're scaffolding, and you're giving the accommodation and some tools, and then sometimes you can then, over time, face some of those accommodations and see if they can access that text and access the material that you're assessing. So, yeah, I can go on and on, but you don't want me to.
Matt? Thank you, Allison. I appreciate it. We will next call on you when we talk about finance.
The flexibility in this is great. I'm just, there are scenarios in which students ever take a test for an age that's older than them, or is that just never done?
Another great question. No, that's not allowed. So if you have a child in the sixth grade who's reading on an eighth grade level, they take the sixth grade test. So that's an interesting concept, and maybe at some point in the future we are. The state testing program is by no means is it perfect, and I think for us, it's called high stakes testing, but I think to place too much value on the 3 through 8 exams would be a mistake. I think it's a data point. It's good information. It's valuable to help teachers make curriculum decisions and to target individual needs or challenge children who are functioning at a higher level. But I think sometimes we have a tendency to overemphasize the importance of this one snapshot of a child's performance.
Do I have further questions or comments regarding proposed resolution 3?
Mine is just seriously back to the sunsetting. What does that even mean? And this is let's not resolve it right now, but maybe look into it later. Does it mean that it's actually?
I read through it in somewhere, and
it just seems like we should be able to do this, and it's going to be potentially terminated. Anyway, so this is it doesn't have to be discussed, but just let's make sure that we can't already be doing this. For example,
yeah, if you see it again, let me know.
Yeah, and if anyone finds it, tell me.
So are we in favor then? Anyone object to supporting this resolution? Okay. Moving on, we're going to go to the next one, which is also from the Board of Directors, that supports proposals that would increase state and federal reimbursements for school meals. Does anyone object to supporting this? I know it doesn't directly necessarily apply to us at this moment in terms of Garrison. Okay. Resolution 5 supports proposals that would generate new state revenues with the dedicated purpose of funding education. anyone object to finding more money for schools?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yes for that one. We're going to keep going. Resolution 6.
I have one question about that.
Yes.
Microphone.
You can have a microphone, yeah.
I mean, what, doing like betting on football? I mean, what are the ways in which they're going to raise money for the school?
Yeah, they're looking at state lottery, video lottery, terminal gaming, education funds.
That's right.
Any other ways. It's a very broad way. I feel like a lot of these resolutions pertain to funding and increasing it any way they can, which I'm very happy to see the School Board Association wants to give us more money. But this is a very broad, there's not a lot in here to like specifics.
I have an answer about sunsetting. It's on page 37. These were resolutions adopted in 2016. It lasts 5 years. The following resolutions were adopted during the 2016 annual business meeting and are set to expire this year unless reintroduced through the 2021 resolutions process.
So they were adopted.
They were adopted.
So they were adopted
It's
just
expiring.
it was just to support proposals for testing at developmental age. So it wasn't
They weren't passed.
like they weren't passed then. You were just supporting proposals. This is why
They were passed by NYSSBA and they advocated for it. The legislative body in Albany has not made any changes based on
So we gotta
NYSSBA's lobbying
re-up it.
efforts.
Yeah.
Which is why I come back to this is really just us, the school districts coming together to support lobbying efforts. This will not necessarily change the laws. Next, we're going to move on to Resolution 6. I am going to keep this moving, guys, just because we don't want to spend all night on this. Then, this one's from these are new ones from the NASDA BOCES board. Support legislation to amend the education law to permit voters to obtain absentee ballots for school district elections and budget votes when such elections and budget votes are scheduled on a day which coincides with a religious holiday for such voters. Does anybody have any objections to this proposed resolution? Okay. Questions? We're going to move on. That's a yes for that one, Madeline. Resolution 7, the Newark School Board proposed to work with the Office of State Comptroller and other necessary policymakers to ensure that comptroller audits are based on statutory guidelines or provisions of state law rather than subjective standards and preferences. I'm going to go to Madeline, who I think is going to have a question for Joe. Pick up the microphone, please, Madeline, and speak up loud, nice and loud.
What does this mean for the district?
Can you repeat the question, Tim?
She
Put
said,
the
what
mic
does it
closer
mean for
to
the
the
district? So essentially, when the comptroller comes in and does an audit, there is,
You got to use the microphone closer, real close. There you go.
all right. So when the comptroller comes in and does an audit, there is certain criteria that they use to evaluate the school district. But some of it is subjective in that they will say things like you have been too conservative on your budgeting, or you have not exercised the use of fund balance correctly, and that's a judgment call rather than to say you had a fund balance in excess of 4%. So a defined number and a target. So when you read the comptroller's audit, sometimes there is interpretation that the auditors have to determine, their opinion of what the way your district is running, and it's not fair to do that, because then it depends too much upon your auditor than a standard, right? It depends upon the interpretation of that individual person. This is endeavoring to make the standards quantifiable and known, and that everyone knows what they are, and there's a judgment call when you're viewing the district and their performance.
So when they give us subjective comment, what happens? Do we still have to comply with them, or is it more a recommendation or something to?
We still have a really hard time hearing you. Can you put like right up there? You go.
There we go. when they give us subjective comments, what happens? Do we still need to comply, or is it more a recommendation to look at?
So if they come up with a subjective opinion on the district, we still need to come up with a corrective action and a plan to deal with what they brought up. We can bring up in our corrective action, there's components that we agree with and don't agree with, and that is always a right of the district to have a response. So when you access the comptroller's websites and you read the audit reports, there's always going to be the district or the municipality's response to the comptroller's audit decisions, and they'll talk about what they agree with and what they don't agree with, and they'll say this is what our corrective action is. And the corrective action is reviewed by the comptroller, and once they say that corrective action is acceptable, then the audit is closed and it's posted and everyone reads it. So there is opportunity to discuss and to disagree with what the comptroller's opinion is, but you still are going to have to do a corrective action if there's a finding.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments regarding this? I will say that as a small district, I think this is important because audits are expensive in terms of our employees' time especially. We haven't had a comptroller's audit. I believe the last one was 2016. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, so we'll probably get one within the next year or two.
Yeah, so it would be nice to have good standards for that. It also does point out that some of the rationales to have help with that corrective action plan. So that would be great. So anyone not in favor of this one? Voting yes? Okay. Go on to Resolution 8, the Henrik Hudson School Board proposed this one. It supports updates to the open meeting law to allow for school board trustees to attend meetings remotely via video conferencing without disclosing their location and without permitting public in-person access to an individual trustee's remote location. Anyone not in favor of this one? Okay, we'll vote yes to that. Proposed resolution 9 is very similar to above, although it does include committees as well to meet remotely. This is again probably a response to the pandemic. Anyone object to resolution 9? Okay. Resolution 10 from the Croton-Harmon School Board supports revision of the Child Safety Zone statute, which is Education Law 3635B, and implementing regulations of the State Education Department to establish a more flexible and meaningful set of criteria for the determination of a child safety zone. There is a lot of rationale support here. Does anybody have any objections to supporting this? Okay. Resolution 11. I'm not sure how to pronounce that district's name. This is for funding for assistance to school districts to allow them to make and implement decisions in the best interest of the global environment, including and especially in the areas of facilities, improvements, transportation, and upkeep. Justin, did you have a question on this one?
Yeah, as I was reading this whole long packet, I was into this one, of course. And I was thinking it's too little too late if it were to ever pass for the kind of work we're doing. So that's all I'll say. It's more of like a comment. I mean, I can't imagine that there would be opportunity for retroactive application for funding for districts that have spearheaded the way in the best interest of the global environment. Anyway, I mean, that was just my thinking as I read it. No comments. I mean, I approve, of course, this idea.
I agree, actually, that retroactively I would love to get more money from the state for capital improvement.
We can always ask NYSSBA, not NYSSBA, yes, NYSSBA, NYSSBA. We can always ask NYSSBA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, on this topic, I have some good news that Joe and I received just hours ago. And our architect, Tetra Tech, has been working on an application for New York State's Clean Heating Incentive Program. Mm-hmm. So it seems like we are eligible for about $120,000 due to our project and going to an environmentally friendly HVAC system. So there is some money available, and we're pursuing that, and we don't have approval yet, but it does look like we are eligible, and that's exciting because we could probably put $120,000 to good use at the end of the project, and there are some things that we'd like to finish up. But I think they're really falling short. We've had many conversations about transportation, for example, and having more incentives for electric vehicles and school buses, and those incentives are minimal. So although there's some incentives, and we'll pursue everything that exists, having more would be very helpful to districts.
So Joe, do you have to apply for this, or is this the contractor doing it, the architect doing it?
The architect has basically started the application, and it's just something that we have to sign. It's not difficult.
Okay.
Matt?
Just a general question. Traditionally, do we have a sense of the percentage of NYSSBA resolutions that traditionally get approved as actual legislation?
That's probably on page 48 or 9.
Is there any sense that this is like, are we whistling into the wind with this stuff, or does it, like, it's a huge packet to sort of submit to legislators. I'm just curious if they kind of read through it, or if would be an advantage. This isn't something we can do single-handedly as our own district, but like, I assume NYSSBA knows what they're doing, so there wouldn't be an advantage to just sort of submitting like 2 resolutions that matter a lot, as opposed to like a book that I hope they actually read. Just curious if this stuff happens, because there's so many sunsetting resolutions. It makes me wonder if like every 5 years we just propose some really great ideas and nobody actually listens, or do they listen?
My understanding is NYSSBA does have a fair amount of power in Albany. I do think when you come to things like funding, they still have to find the money.
Right.
And there is a challenge there. Carl, I don't know if you want to speak to this more, or Dusty even, of your experience in past districts. Our district traditionally, at least in my experience on the board, Courtney, Dave, you've been down here longer, have not been super involved with NYSSBA in recent years. But now this is a way to re-engage.
And my general reaction to these proposals or these recommendations is that they're kind of milquetoast. I mean, I haven't heard one yet, but I can imagine any organized opposition developing to in the legislature. Why would anybody oppose any of these?
Well,
What's one example of one that would be opposed?
I agree, but NYSSBA themselves, the committee opposes at least 10 of them. It doesn't recommend them, doesn't oppose them. Right. So it is interesting. They've selected the ones that they probably think have feet in the legislature. Perhaps.
I mean, I assume it's money, right? That seems like the only reason to oppose any of them would be because people don't want it.
Pay more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
So these recommendations have to come out of individual school districts, is that right? I mean, we'd have to say, we would like, if we wanted something more aggressive, we'd have to go through a process here of approving it.
Yes, and Dusty can speak to that. There is a process. We would need to submit it in a very timely fashion, meaning this week, if we wish to make an amendment for this year's resolutions. Am I correct, Dusty?
That's correct. In the packet, which I know is quite voluminous, on the NYSSBA packet that was posted on Board Docs, there is a process for either amending a current resolution that we can submit, which has to be done by Friday the 17th, or you could propose a new resolution altogether. And there are forms included in that as well, which are, in that part of that packet as well. But that's something that, as the district clerk, I would submit if you all chose to amend a resolution and you give the language, then we can amend a resolution.
But realistically, there's not time to go through the process of considering.
Right, we're a little behind on it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think not for this
Maybe
year.
next year.
I think
Yeah.
next year we're going to be in a learning curve with this, and I think once Madeline will be in physical attendance this year at the convention, and will be able to report back to us as to how we can have more of an impact. But I do think it's worthwhile in that for all the comments we have throughout the year, various meetings as to how do we have an impact on these issues. This is one avenue that's already established for our little district to sort of lobby for what we want to see happen in education.
Right. I suppose I might have expected something a little more aggressive on the issue of critical race theory, for instance, where school boards actually can make a statement about something as controversial and as central as that debate currently is, but this skirts any of that stuff.
I think these are much more focused on funding at the moment.
I do agree with everything you just said, Sarah. I don't question doing it. I was just curious what happens at the end of the path, but I definitely want to do it. Yeah.
We can find out more.
Yeah.
Madeline, tell us.
Thanks, Madeline.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to keep us moving because we do have other things to do this evening. So, Resolution 12 from the Washingtonville School Board, support legislation at the state and federal level for their appropriate governmental agencies to assume the fiscal responsibility for student nutrition, shifting that financial burden away from public schools to be a change and would have an impact on their annual budgets. While I recognize that we do not have currently a lunch program, I think this is still of value. Anyone not in favor of supporting this? Okay. Resolution 13, Shenandoah School Board supports state legislation that would evaluate the efficiency of and require use of accurate recent data in future implementation of foundation aid. Madeline, you had a question on this one? Pick up the microphone, hold it really close, and then shout at us.
I'm unfamiliar with foundation aid. Can
Right.
talk a little bit more about what it is and what this means?
Yes, so foundation aid is formula aid, which is the major part of aid that school districts receive, and it depends upon the enrollment, the historical enrollment, as well as wealth factors for the school district. So the average cost of property and the relative need of that district in relationships to others. The thing that is a drawback with it is a lot of times it's using data that's maybe 4 or 5 years old to develop the formula, and a lot of things can happen in 4 or 5 years. So the push for this particular item is to use the most accurate, most current data available in order to determine what share of foundation aid goes to what district versus another.
I mean, my only question on this was, do you, Joe, or Carl, see how this might impact our district in any negative way?
It could impact the district in a negative way if the relative wealth measurement of the district comes out at a different level than it does currently. So there is ways that it could.
But that's the fair thing. So.
But that's
right.
Yeah, it's a item of fairness,
right.
Which is there are many districts that are on the other side of the wealth spectrum, and I know that it is a challenge every year to get even the most basic things that are needed at those districts.
I'll also point out in the rationale that this has not been updated since the foundation aid formula, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's not been updated since implementation of the tax cap, which has completely changed how we're doing our budget process. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it seems like we are due for an update to this formula.
And I will say, my superintendent's group in this region, they've been talking about changing this foundation aid formula for, as Sarah said, it seems like past eight years plus. And again, we recognize the wealthier districts may get a bit less, but they feel pretty strongly about, so they've been advocating for a change to this as well as school boards.
There was a tremendous amount of funding that was cut in the financial crisis of 2008, and that the gap between what was promised and what was actually received by districts is much larger for the districts that have a lot more needs. So there is a big disparity there.
Do I have any additional questions or comments on this one? Okay, no one's not in favor, everyone's in favor of this one, all right. Rephrase that question there. Resolution 14, from the Ulster BOCES Board, have a legislative imperative and addition to the current New York State public health law that all immunizations required of students under the provisions of New York State Public Health Law 2164 be required of all school staff where medically appropriate for adults. Does anyone have questions? Are we in support of this as well? Okay. Resolution 15, again from the Shenandoah School Board, supports state legislation to establish guidelines for school districts for identifying and capturing data and creating metrics for initiatives that mitigate the damaging effects associated with climate change so as to more effectively communicate expectations and monitor outcomes when planning and implementing school budgets. All right, I don't see any objections to that one. Okay, Resolution 16, Washingtonville School Board, support legislation that abolishes state school level expenditure reporting. Madeline, did you have a question on this one? You gotta use the microphone. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about this one?
Yes, so there is a requirement. It doesn't mean a lot for this school district because we only have one school. But school districts that have multiple schools at a grade level have to report the expenditures that are spent at those individual schools so to show that there is a equitable treatment between all of the schools within a school district. It is a very difficult thing to do from the get-go, from when this started, because traditionally school budgets were not set up that way, so that all of the expenditures for a particular component of the budget were all grouped together regardless of what school they were. And so it was a very difficult task to get this going. And for larger districts, it does represent a burden, but the goal of it essentially was to show that you are fairly dividing up the money of the school budget on a per pupil basis based upon the need and based upon what is required of the district.
I hadn't even flagged this one, but the way you explain it makes me think that unless there's another method for ensuring that monies are equitably distributed, that this should be kept.
I also think this might be one where we wish to abstain, would be my view, because it doesn't really it's not something we have firsthand knowledge of.
You don't have a dog in the race.
We don't have a dog in the race, and also, maybe this is helping some of those districts or hurting some of them. I don't know.
Right.
Their business office is operating with different people, so. I agree. Does anyone else have thoughts on that?
What do you think, Madeline?
There's also very little rationale provided for this.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in favor of, we have a consensus to abstain on Resolution 16, which brings us to Resolution 17. This is the final one recommended by the committee, which supports state aid eligibility for school districts that are obligated to pay tuition reimbursement for unilateral private placements. Is anyone not in favor of this? Okay, great. So with the next ones, we're going to go quickly here. Resolution 18, this is not supported by the committee. It supports laws and procedures that ensure teachers and school employee background checks are thorough, cover out-of-state incidents, have the ability to continually report incidents throughout an employee's career. The rationale for not moving forward with this is that there is already a strong process in place. And to Matt's point, there is already a lot that we are asking NYSSBA to advocate for. So everybody okay with the no on this one, not moving this forward? Okay. Resolution 19 seeks legislative and/or policy changes to streamline the teacher certification project for teachers from out of state and those with previous teaching experience. Madeline, did you have a question on this one?
Do we have any reason to do this right now? I would like to hear more, I guess, about the district. Is there a reason to do this at our district?
Madeline, no, the certification process in New York can be quite challenging. So basically, if a teacher is certified in Connecticut and wants to work in New York, the recommendation is to make that easy, have like more reciprocity. Right now, you have to apply to New York. I must say the process takes a very long time. You cannot speak with anyone on the phone. You have to apply. Sometimes you wait several months for a response. You may be deficient with one course. And so I do think in a way to streamline that process, and all states have different requirements, though. We have to keep that in mind. Some are more stringent, some are more lenient. But to streamline that process, right now we're experiencing a teacher shortage. So I think if you have, I think as a district we can determine if someone is competent and qualified to teach, and I don't know that we need to rely on the state telling us that a Connecticut teacher is missing one course that's required in New York, and you cannot hire them because they need to complete that one course. So I like it. It's a bit vague. It doesn't really give specifics. There are many different types of certification. But in general, I agree with the idea behind this, which is to streamline this process and offer easier reciprocity. And I think that's a good thing.
So right now, NYSSBA is recommending a no, so we want to go with a yes. Is that what I'm hearing?
Do I have consent to, the no rationale here was that they believe that the process is currently adequate.
Do we want to streamline it?
Yeah.
It sounds like we do want to streamline it.
We want to streamline. Does anyone have any objections to voting yes on this one? Okay. All right, moving on to 20 is support the proposed New York Health Act and any legislation at the state or federal level that provides single-payer health care for all New Yorkers. Jocelyn?
I mean, we shouldn't belabor these ones that they're not recommending, but they claim in their explanation that this is a federal issue, but it's obviously a New York State issue because it's the New York State Act. So I don't see why we might not.
I'm going to group this actually with 21.
Yeah, they're similar.
Legislation
You should,
that requires every child in New York State age 0 to 21 to be covered for free under the Child Health Care Plus program. They are two different things. With 20, I think I'm actually in favor of this because we spend so much on health care as a district. It is such a financial issue for us. So I would like to see it come out of our budget. But I know it's more complicated than that. And I see NYSSBA's point that they might not get very far with this.
I think
but
it's just for show, but I think showing our support if people are not opposed for 20 and 21, it's just showing that the movement is still alive.
I agree.
For single payer.
I agree.
We agree? So that's for 20 and 21 for healthcare. Okay. 22, support legislation which requires the state of New York to hold school districts harmless for employee or retirement health care increases that exceed the consumer price index. The rationale for rejecting this is below. Does anyone want to change or support this? I didn't see this as, I think this has a lot of issues with it.
I don't think it's a gain for the district.
I didn't understand.
There we go. Okay, so I think that's a
I
no.
didn't care. And this one, I don't care because of everything you just said to make sense, but this one I just didn't actually understand. But given that you're not into it, I can move on. I found the wording confusing.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that's confusing about it, and I don't think that it would lead to any actual money gained
Yeah.
once it got through. I don't think it would pass a legal.
Yeah, that was my gut instinct, yeah.
Resolution 23, support legislation that creates a
Can we go
process.
back?
No,
Is that
no
a
on
no?
22. 23, we're getting to the end, guys. Support legislation that creates a process for tenure review and renewal occurring every 5 years throughout the career of all tenured public school employees.
I think we need to hear, to see what you recommend on this, Carl.
Well, tenure can be a complicated topic, but let's see. I think about 6 or 7 years ago, the tenure period for a probationary teacher or administrator was 3 years. They increased it to 4. I agree with that. I think that was a good thing. I also believe that 4 years is plenty of time for a school district to determine if a teacher is effective or highly effective, and the teacher is deserving, or the administrator is deserving of tenure. In my experience, teachers that start out strong usually finish strong. There could be exceptions, but in general, you have a fairly new, young, motivated teacher. Usually they have that motivation and maintain it throughout their career, even people that teach for 30 or 35 years. There are some exceptions, and I think that's the argument for renewing tenure. But I think it's a bit of a dangerous thing because teachers lose that protection, and a new administrator who may, just not like a teacher, or for whatever reason, once you lose tenure, you're very vulnerable. And someone who maybe has given 20 or 25 years to a district, so it's a complicated topic. It has some pros and cons, but I go back to, I think the current system, at least from my perspective, works. If a district is doing what it needs to do, you have 4 years to get it right, and that's plenty of time.
Matt?
I think it's a disingenuous resolution. I think it's an anti-tenure resolution. It's a contradiction to say renew tenure. Tenure's not renewable. That's the whole point of tenure. So if they want to have an argument about whether tenure should exist, I think they should articulate that rather than, I think both. I think the explanation of the resolutions committee is also dancing around what they're actually talking about. So that's an enormous topic. That's a radical and revolutionary proposal that isn't actually articulated here. But if someone wanted to say that, then there'd be like a national discussion. This is just a sort of like, I don't know if they think they're pulling the wool over people's eyes and articulating it this way, but I just found it to be a sort of muddled, disingenuous proposal, so I don't want to engage it because I don't feel like we're on the level.
Right, and also the explanation, like you said. It's like, it'll be a burden. It's like you have to do APPR every year, which is a burden, to still evaluate teachers. It's not a good rationale, but I agree.
No. I don't, well, these I think they're just abstain or no, don't let them bring it forward. Last one, right?
Just 20.
Oh, there's 25. Ardsley School Board encourage laws, regulations, and policies that promote alternatives for school districts when purchasing non-instructional services that do not give the BOCES an unfair competitive advantage. Jocelyn, did you have a question on this one?
My only question was, does this mean anything for our district? Should we choose to vote yes, or should we just vote no? I just don't know.
And just to know that this came up last year and it almost passed by like 3%. It didn't pass. So this one, everyone was almost 50-50 on it.
It's interesting. For a smaller district like Garrison and districts, even larger districts, we really depend on BOCES for various services that we just cannot produce ourselves. The other thing is, when you go through BOCES, you receive state aid, which is designed, and Joe, feel free to jump in here, but it is designed to support BOCES. And sometimes people resent that because if you go on the open market for a service, you're paying full price. But with BOCES, you may be entitled to 30, 40, sometimes 50% aid. So these other companies sometimes cannot compete with BOCES, but that state aid is designed to support BOCES because they do serve a very important need. I think if you eliminate that, it will hurt BOCES financially, and BOCES are needed just in so many different ways. A small district like Garrison really depends on them, and they're incredibly supportive. We have a great local BOCES. But Joe, do you want to add to this?
Well, I think that if you have a good purchasing person at your district, they can recognize whether or not buying something through a BOCES is worthwhile versus buying it elsewhere. And I think that BOCES have to have some advantages in order for them to be able to offer the wide variety of services and to provide that breadth. And if they didn't, if there wasn't ways to aid that, they wouldn't be able to do all the things that can be done. And the advantage to using BOCES is just like the advantage to using state contract. If you need something tomorrow and you can get it through the BOCES, you can get it through the BOCES tomorrow. So that there is definitely some advantages to keeping the mechanisms that keep BOCES strong in place.
So would you say with just any, I guess, BOCES contract, that their prices is still competitive? And also calculating that we would get some state aid back, is it still competitive?
You have to evaluate them on a case by case basis, but it is an advantage to a district to be able to have that as a choice, because you know, you can pull the trigger on a BOCES purchase very quickly, you know, for whatever service that you need.
Oh, David?
Carl, what's the best case against supporting this?
Excuse me, David?
What's the counter argument? What's the best case on the other side?
The counter argument is I think if you have a dysfunctional BOCES where they are not operating in a cost-effective way and being responsible with their own budget, I could see districts in a BOCES like that wanting to eliminate this advantage that they have. But, for example, in a case like our BOCES, Putnam, Northern Westchester, they're extremely transparent with their finances, and we're invited to their financial meetings. They are always looking for ways to operate in a cost-efficient way and pass on, you know, that advantage to their local districts. So I think probably, Madeline said, there may be a lot of districts out there in favor of this. I think it depends on your geographical location and how your BOCES is supporting you and operating.
And does there have to be a uniform policy that applies to every district?
Yes. So that's correct. This state aid model that you get by obtaining services through BOCES is a statewide thing. So, yeah, it's all or nothing.
But if your BOCES doesn't offer a service, you can get it from another BOCES. So, or if another BOCES is better at a service than the one that you have, you can get it from that one.
Sure.
So Ardsley School proposed this resolution. Are they with the North and Westchester the same BOCES that we are using? Or
No,
do they use a different one?
They're Southern Westchester BOCES, Madeline. And it may not be a reflection on Southern Westchester BOCES, it may just be their opinion. But I tend to agree with Joe. It's good to have the option. We're not prevented from dealing with an outside vendor. But I think it's good to have this option. And again, in taking away this ability, I think you hurt BOCES with all of the services that they provide.
Do I have any other questions or comments on this, Madeline?
Just the last one. So this one is not getting rid of BOCES, but promoting other alternatives. So you will still have BOCES, or you can go
But it might
outside.
financially ruin both.
Ruin both. Okay, understand.
Any other thoughts, questions? So not supporting that one as recommended? What do you think?
If we need BOCES, because we're small, I think then it would be a no, right?
It is,
Yeah, we
there
don't
is a
wanna-
waiver too.
we
You
don't
can't,
wanna
you
use
don't have to use
Yeah,
BOCES.
so it would be a no, Larry?
That's what I'm comfortable with. Do we have consensus on that or?
No.
Okay. All right, moving on. Resolution 25, the last one, oppose proposals to allow school district voters to use non-excuse absentee ballots upon request for school board elections and budget votes. Thoughts, questions?
Okay, a no.
No. Does anyone want to support this?
I don't know how they snuck in some voter suppression in there last one, but.
Okay, no. All right. We are done with this. Madeline, I hope you enjoy your time at the conference, and I can't wait to hear about it. It's 2 days in New York. It's in the city, right?
Yes.
It's great. Thank you for representing us. Okay. Now we are going to move on. If there's any further comments on that? President's remarks, I'm going to be really brief this evening. We have our board retreat. It's a joint retreat with Haldane coming up on the 25th. It will begin at 9 a.m., correct, Dusty, and go till 1 p.m. Our plan currently, and Dusty's working out all the details with Haldane, is to invite them to our lovely pavilion. Hopefully the weather will be nice and we will all be able to be outside together there. We'll have updates on lunch forthcoming. Okay. I did want to point out that the policy binder that we had been working on for a couple of years has gone out as of August 5th and gone back for review. In 3 to 5 months, we should get it back. And I want to thank the policy committee, of which I'm on, but it's been such a pleasure to work with you guys on it, with Jocelyn and Courtney on that. And thank you to Courtney for chairing that committee and getting that mammoth binder out for review. And it'll all come back to us soon. So look forward to reading a really giant binder of updated policies soon, guys. It's going to be fun. Okay. Oh, and of course, sorry, I had one here. Congratulations, everyone. I know we've been talking for a while, but for getting school open with the construction project, with all the COVID restrictions. So thank you, administrators. Thank you, teachers. Thank you, facilities, staff, all of our bus drivers. I read in the news every day about bus driver shortages and issues, and ours show up and have been wonderful, which also goes to Mr. Twardy's leadership in that group. So thank you all for getting school open. Carl, your turn.
Yes. And I will just echo that. A big thank you to all of our teachers, staff, facilities department, of course, Mr. Twardy, who had a very busy summer, and the administrative team. It's been a smooth opening. The children are settled in beautifully, and our teachers, especially at the elementary level, needed to be very flexible, and they were. And many of them were here over the extended Labor Day weekend, setting up classrooms because construction did go down to the wire, and we deeply appreciate their efforts, their flexibility, and they opened school in a very positive way for the children. Few brief comments. This is a follow-up to last board meeting. The Department of Health, New York State Department of Health, did issue a mandate that all staff must be either vaccinated or submit to weekly COVID testing. I'm happy to report that at this point we have proof of vaccination for 92% of the Garrison staff, 100% of the staff that works directly with children. Also, the question was posed approximately how many of our eligible students, 12 and up, were vaccinated, and at this point we are just about 50%. There may be some more that are trickling in, but that's where we are currently. The next point I just want to make is in case any of our board members or community have seen some construction workers on the roof. I have made an exception. All construction work in the building is second shift. It starts at 3:30, goes through 11:30 p.m. However, we're making a big investment in the classrooms inside the building, and we want to make sure our roof is in good shape and watertight before we start doing the interior renovations. So because the days are starting to get shorter, and there are limits to how much roof work you can do from 3:30 till about 7 or 7:30 as it starts to get dark, we're allowing some roof work just it occurred today and will occur into next week, probably 3 or 4 days next week. That will help us to get this roof work completed. It'll be watertight, and then we will continue with interior work 100% after school. So just in case parents drop off and see roofers, we gave them that okay, and I think there's a good rationale to do that. They will never enter the building. Third, I just want to mention that, and later on in the agenda, we had a few resignations with our performing arts department. One is the theater teacher, which happened over the summer. She relocated out of state and landed a full-time job in New England, and we're happy for her. And we also received a resignation from our music teacher. Mrs. Amig and I have been working diligently to come up with a plan to make sure music and theater continue this year. We are going to initially start with substitute teachers to cover our music and performing arts program, and we want to take a little time. We're looking at the model, and we're thinking maybe we want to tweak the model. We met with a group of teachers, and the administrative team has been meeting, and we want to be very thoughtful, and we don't want to rush that process, but we are actively looking. Children will have music, and that'll happen soon, and theater will follow shortly after. And that's all I have in the way of updates, Sarah.
Do you have any questions for Carl on his updates? Okay, moving on to approval of superintendent goals. Carl, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Sure. Dusty, there you go.
You all have this in your...
All right, so I have a slideshow. So every year, Board of Educations need to consider goals presented by a superintendent and make any suggestions or comments and eventually formally approve those goals. And these are major initiatives that I would work on, not alone, of course, in a collaborative way over the course of a school year. I try to avoid any routine. There are many routine responsibilities that superintendents have. So those are not included, but I do have a proposal of 5 goals, and I have shared them with the board. We'll go through them, and then I welcome any feedback that you may have. So the first one is a continuation of a goal that was started last year. Our district-wide coherence plan is well underway. We have a consultant working with a planning team consisting of, I believe there's 15 members. We have parents, we have administrators, we have teachers on that team, and we have board members. Last year, Dusty, if you can go to the next slide, we stopped at this point. We spent an awful lot of time surveying the community. We did thought exchanges, elicited feedback, and we established the vision of the graduate. And on the screen, you see the 3 skills and the 3 attributes that we think are most important for an 8th grade student to leave Garrison with. It may not look like months of work, but it was. It was an extremely thoughtful process, and I thank the committee. We did take a pause on this process. The pandemic was a bit of a challenge. There was a lot of volunteer time from the committee, and we thought, particularly with Mrs. Amig coming on board in November and knowing that we were adding some new team members, Director of Technology and Innovation, as well as our new environmental educator. And with COVID and a combination of things, we thought it made sense to take a pause in the spring and continue this planning process in the fall. So that is one major goal. We already have calendar dates. The committee will reconvene. We'll be working on analyzing data, looking at gaps to develop action plans, timelines, expectations. This part 2 of this process will be a lot more specific, a lot more detailed, and will guide the Garrison School District for at least 3 years into the future. Programs, curriculum, everything will revolve around this plan, and it is very important. The next goal I'm proposing is continuing our focus on teaching and learning. We made a good advance with mathematics by implementing a new math program this year. But we're obligated to align with New York's next generation learning standards in math, ELA, and science. So math is really off to a good start. Because of the pandemic, it was postponed by a year. And I'm going to ask Dusty to go to the next slide, which shows an adjusted timeline. So I did have this as a goal last year, but we were given a bit more time because PD was very difficult last year. We did a lot, but there is more to do. So this shows the ELA timeline, and you see that this school year, they're giving us one more year to build capacity, which means really intense professional development around the new standards, more curriculum work. We've done work, but there is some more to do, and then be fully implemented in the 22-23 school year. Dusty, if you can move on to mathematics. Again, there was a revised timeline. I think we're really ahead with our new Envisions math program. The teachers launched it the first day of school. We had training, and we will have training throughout the school year, and that program is 100% aligned with the next gen standards, K through 8. So we're ahead of schedule, but teachers, it is a new program, and teachers will need a lot of support in the way of PD, but all the resources are in their classrooms, and we're excited about that. Dusty, one more, and here you have the pre-K through 12 science standards, of course, where K through 8 is our focus. This is also an area that needs a lot of professional development, curriculum alignment. We're very excited to have an environmental educator here who will make sure that environmental sciences is taught in grades K through 8, and that there is a continuum. There's been a lot of great environmental education that has happened in the past in Garrison, but we want to make sure we have a continuum and that it builds year after year, and that there is an alignment. So that work will be happening. Next, a district-wide communications plan. Over the summer, we had a very productive board retreat, and this I see as a shared goal for everyone in the district. But I do plan to provide leadership in developing a district-wide comprehensive communication plan. We want to look at other districts, best practices, model communication, and then determine what is great for Garrison. What is an effective communications plan for us? We don't have positions like larger districts, like public relations experts on staff. We probably shouldn't have that. I don't think that's necessary, but I do think at every level, from our main offices, our clerical staff, our business office, our teachers, and how they communicate with conferences, electronically, all of those communications, administration, our principal's office, the superintendent's office, the business office, and right up to the board level, because I know the board wants to also work on this. And I see this as a really good collaborative initiative. And I think formalizing a plan where everyone knows what their role is and what their part is and what the expectation is important. And we'll work on that. And I think we should, by midwinter, have a formal plan in place. Next, if you've been following Garrison's story, last year we did spend an awful lot of time on equity, diversity, and inclusion. We did a lot of great work with an anti-racism task force. We worked with a wonderful consultant, developed strategic plans, but now they need to be implemented. We did a lot of planning last year, a lot of training, but we do have goals, specific goals that we want to pursue. We were hopeful in the spring that we could start on some of those goals, but again, the pandemic did present some challenges, but we need to get back to that. The first step is to form a committee. One recommendation from the task force was to have an equity, diversity, and inclusion committee, and also have subcommittees. Teachers working on curriculum, teachers having input into professional development in this area. Also doing things at the community level, and things like a self-audit of our curriculum to make sure it is reflecting equity, diversity, and inclusion. And also creating a safe learning environment in the school. One perfect example of that was Mrs. Amig's code of conduct. Again, doing something like that through an equity lens is what we strive for. And the last one is a continuation also. But the district capital project now is entering phase 2. The summer was extremely busy, as you know, but now we are moving into phase 2, which is second shift work. Classrooms, clusters of classrooms are being renovated. My work really is to provide the leadership, working with Joe Jimmick, Mrs. Amig, and a committee, a group of project managers and architects meeting weekly to make sure the plan stays on schedule and things get done. One area that I would like to focus on, I think we're going to need a subcommittee to accomplish this, is to think about our library media center. Right now, we are, in our construction budget, we're just getting a renovated, finished space, but educationally, there is no design plan currently. So we will have a new library media center. There'll be new lighting, new floors. It'll look beautiful, but it'll be empty. So I would like to work with a subcommittee and come up with a design that supports our educational goals that makes sense with regards to furniture, the arrangement, the technology in there. And that's an exciting initiative that I'm happy to lead this year. And maybe even some of that grant money I talked about earlier, that $120,000 from the Clean Heating Initiative program, maybe that could be applied and combined with maybe some outside sources, some budget, and we can do something pretty spectacular with that library media space, which really can be the hub of the school district. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Carl, for your time and attention on these. And I'll just remind the board and the public that we use these goals once approved. We enter them into the NYSSBA rubric, which we use for the superintendent evaluation. We'll do a mid-year, and then we do one at the end of the year. Questions for Carl? Comments on the goals as presented? Madeline, grab the microphone.
Thank you for the goals. I see that 2 are new compared to last year, and that we really, really need this year. So thank you. We're looking forward to it. Then there were 2 last year that was completed. I think one was the policy for staff, and another one for special education. Mm-hmm. So as those goals were completed, is there a follow-up this year, or just seeing how things are doing? I just don't know what's the next step on those 2 other goals.
Madeline, yeah, there were 2 goals, one in human resources and the other in special education. That work is ongoing. I really think we made some dramatic improvements in both areas over the course of last school year. Now I think it's more about refining both areas of the school organization. So the answer is yes. There'll be PD. We'll look for other ways to enhance our HR. We're already talking about trying to create more efficiencies with onboarding staff. Our new director of technology and Innovation had some great ideas to streamline our internal process there. But we'll be looking at both from various perspectives, and yes, continuing that work. It's ongoing.
Do you have any other questions or comments regarding the goals? I just have one with regard to the teaching and learning goal. I want to thank you for continuing to work towards the next generation standards. I can't emphasize enough how important this is, especially as some of these tests will actually change. And I know we were behind in this area, and I appreciate the effort you and your team have put into bringing us up to date. And I know the timeline changed due to the pandemic, but we really were off course on this a few years ago. So thank you for your work in this area. Any other ones? Okay, then
I just have one. Sorry. Carl, can you talk a little bit about where you think we are on the coherence plan and where you would want to be a few months from now?
Sure, David. I think where we are is we have the vision of the graduate. We have a team, a planning team that has gone through training and I think understands the process and what the community is looking for, and we have a good cross-section of the community. But next is to look at data. It's a little tricky because the last 2 years the data has stalled, especially with the state exams, but we do have other data. But breaking up into subgroups, analyzing that data, looking for the gaps, and then really developing specific action plans for the district, timelines, expectation, what we can do in year 1, what we plan to accomplish year 2 and year 3, programmatically. And then bring that plan back to the board. What my estimate is that by February, Jonathan Costa and I have spoken, I think if we start this work next month as planned, by February, we will have a completed coherence plan to present to the board and present to the public. Okay.
Okay. If there's any other questions or comments, I'm going to move ahead with the resolution to adopt. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the superintendent goals for the 2021-2022 school year as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Thank you. Next, we move on to acceptance of the minutes. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the minutes of the September 2nd, 2021 regular meeting. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the minutes as presented? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Thank you. Moving on to the personnel items consent agenda. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Carl L. Albano, Superintendent, hereby approves the items of the personnel consent agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Before I turn this over to Carl to speak to some of these, as the chair of the audit committee, I will speak to the claims auditor resignation and appointment briefly. And Joe, jump in here if you want to. But for those of us who've been on the audit committee for a while, Jocelyn, I know, Matt, you jumped ship this year, but as much fun as audit is, we did replace the claims auditor last year, and we've had a couple of really qualified individuals. However, this position does not take a lot of time, but it does require someone to travel to our district once or twice a month. And finding a highly qualified outside candidate willing to do this for the stipend we offer has proven challenging. So we have looked to an internal candidate, Sarah Lasardi, who works in our office and is willing to take this on in addition to her roles for the stipend provided. If you have any other questions about this, please let me know. Okay, and this recommendation did go through the committee first. I got that right? That was okay, Joe, right? Good.
Yes.
Okay. Carl, do you want to speak to the other personnel items?
Sure. There are a few resignations here. Paul Connors has taught music for the past 2 years. He's moving on to a high school position that he is excited about, and we wish him well. We thank him for his service. As I said earlier, we will be rethinking our performing arts and music program, and we'll make sure the children have quality instruction this year. Also, one of our custodial workers and bus drivers, Mark DeCaro, who has served us well, I believe, for 4 years. We thank him for his service. He's decided to move on, and we wish him well. Also, Diane Metviner has resigned. She served as an aide, I believe, for 2 full years. She's done really good work all throughout the pandemic, helping keep our children safe. We thank Diane, and we wish her well also. To make sure we have coverage, I do have 3 per diem subs at this point that I'm recommending to the board. We've hired a number of subs. Some of them actually have obtained full-time teaching jobs, and that is just the nature. Being a substitute is usually something you do for experience. It's usually temporary, so I think the board should expect that we will continue, Allison and I will continue to replenish our substitute teaching ranks to make sure we have the coverage we need. One in particular, Jeffrey Barone, has a very strong music background, and we are considering him to work with our band program. He's taught for 20 years in a number of different private schools. He also was the assistant conductor and guitarist for the Big Apple Circus. He's worked in a number of Broadway plays, including, I believe, the plays were Wicked, Cats, Dear Evan Hansen, Seussical. I mean, big names down on Broadway. He's got an extensive background. Allison and I both met him, and we think he really may be the person that potentially long-term, but at least for now, he is willing to step in and get our band program back up and running. So we're excited for that. Additionally, we have a person who's not certified, but we believe can fill in the aide vacancy for now. We will eventually bring a recommendation for a permanent aide. And then another person who is a certified teacher, a special ed and gen ed, who will be working covering teachers in classrooms. We're being a little overcautious with subs this year because we're still not out of the pandemic. There may be some quarantines. Last year we really depended on subs to keep the school moving along. We're hoping to do a lot of PD activities. Envision Math, for example. We talked earlier about all the PD. Some of it will take place on conference days, but some of it will take place by providing release time for staff. You have 2 or 3 staff members working with our PD consultants. So that's why the subs are important, and I bring them to you, and I think you have good quality subs that are really going to be critical for us to move ahead this year. And that's all.
Thank you, Carl. Do you have any questions regarding the personnel item? Okay. I'm going to move ahead to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Thank you. Moving on to new business, we have a request for approval of the 2021-2022 Extended School Year Educational Services Contract with Henrik Hudson Central School District. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Carl L. Albano, Superintendent, hereby approves the contract for 2021-2022 Extended School Year Educational Services between the Garrison Union Free School District and the Henrik Hudson Central School District for 1 student, and hereby authorizes the Board President to execute said agreement. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Nays? Abstentions? Okay. Long last, we come to the public comment section of this evening. Public comment is intended for members of the community to speak openly and voice concerns in accordance with Policy 3220 of the Garrison Union Free School District. Any person wishing to speak shall comply with all provisions of this policy. Comments about specific school personnel or individual students is a violation of board policy. Concerns regarding students or personnel should be discussed privately with the superintendent or appropriate administrator. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. The board will listen to comments but will not engage in dialogue. Any necessary follow-up will be noted and provided through the appropriate channel. I believe we had a sign-in sheet, Dusty? Oh, no. So, do I have any comment? Okay, I'm glad I read that. All right, thank you. I'm going to move on to board member comment. And Matt, we're starting at the bottom this week, is that right?
Sure.
Okay, well, that brings me up first, and I just had one little note that I want to add that I forgot from earlier, saying I do realize that Yom Kippur began at sundown this evening, and I apologize for our oversight in scheduling this meeting during the holiday. We will endeavor to do better in the future and make sure that we avoid all holidays. And for all those, I don't think it's not what is the greeting, does anyone know, for, it's the Day of Atonement, so, well, I wish you a solemn Day of Atonement. Okay. I'm going to move on to Matt.
I just want to second the comments earlier, congratulating everyone on the opening. So, thank you.
Okay. Courtney?
No comment.
Madeline? No comment. David?
No comments.
Jocelyn?
Mine is so brief, but as Carl mentioned in his remarks, and it's been brought up, that there's the newly formed EDI committee, and we had a group of people working on the task force last year, and many of them are unable to continue in the next school year for lots of different reasons, particularly community members. We only have one parent signed up other than the 3 board members who are also on the committee, so we will hopefully send out an announcement, I'm guessing soon, to invite some more community members to join. And there's we'll review the process as a committee and then hopefully send it out so that we can get a few more members to join the committee before we embark on the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes board member comment. We're going to move to executive session. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby enters into executive session for the purpose of discussing the employment history of a particular person. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays, abstentions. Okay, we will adjourn the meeting after executive session without taking further action. Please do your best to log out of the new system in this computer and turn it off.